females. I think people would be very interested in knowing how the astronauts themselves feel about the integration of the Corps.
Well, we kind of like it. First of all, I'm kind of surprised that we have got a credibility gap. We tried not to. We tried to do what we said. The problem previously has been we just had to have so much training with, you know, you had to have engineering training, you had to have flight training, you had to have then flight experience. We are looking very much forward to an integrated astronaut corps right now, and I just hope that we get a big response as far as applications. I think we've got something like 1,600 applications now, which I think less than 200 are women. And we really need more than that, and we certainly need a lot of minorities to apply, but we're going to take as many as we possibly can.
And I wanted to see that we had men and women in the space shuttle. I had a vested interest because I wanted to see that our Star Trek universe lived, men and women of all colors working together. And so they said, how can we get people to apply? How can we correct that? And I said, I think you need to get someone immediately with credibility and high visibility, so that when they see them on television and in newspapers and ads and do a complete media blitz, people whom they would believe, and they said, like who? I said, Bill Cosby, Coretta King, and NASA said, how about Lieutenant Uhura?
Oh, hi. I'm Nichelle Nichols. Kind of looks like when I was Uhura on the Starship Enterprise, doesn't it? Well, now there's a 20th century Enterprise, an actual space vehicle built by NASA and designed to put us in the business of space, not merely space exploration. NASA's Enterprise is a space shuttlecraft built to make regularly scheduled runs into space and back. Now, the shuttle will be taking scientists and engineers, men and women of all races, into space, just like the astronaut crew on the Starship Enterprise. So that is why I'm speaking to the whole family of humankind, minorities and women alike. If you qualify and would like to be an astronaut, now is the time. This is your NASA.
Applications for minorities and women skyrocketed to well over 1,000. And from their ranks came the first shuttle astronauts, including 6 women and 3 African Americans.
In 1977, NASA announced that they were going to select a new crop or corps of astronauts to participate in the space shuttle program. The last selection that I knew of was in 1966, so this was 11 years later. And I thought, well, gee whiz, I would at least be competitive with everyone else, and then spent a long time preparing this very complicated and extensive application. It was during this application period that I received a call from friends, and these people had been pilots in an experiment in the early 40s called the Tuskegee experiment. It was an experiment that took Negroes and taught them how to fly. I suspect that it was suspected that they would not be able to accomplish that, but in fact they became excellent flyers and flew in North Africa and Italy, and were very successful flying P-51s and other fighters in the European theater at the end of the Second World War. And if I had had some hesitation as to whether to continue this extensive application, I certainly lost it when these gentlemen talked to me about the fun of flying in an unknown and previously undiscovered area, a black man flying as a fighter pilot in Europe when there had never been black people flying before. Here's a person flying in space in a vehicle that no one has ever flown before.
Ron McNair, Fred, and I came into the astronaut office in '78. None of us knew each other. Ron was from the South, and me and Fred were from the big city. So Ron was our alter ego from that point of view. Fred and I were military guys who had flying experience. Ron was a civilian. The thing that impressed me about Ron was that he had gone to MIT and got a PhD in laser physics, but yet on the other hand, he was a down-to-earth, country sort of guy who was very warm and very easy to get along with.
I'm honored and very pleased at the fact that my position can be a motivation to a lot of youth, a lot of people, to some youth, particularly minority youth, who felt that such goals were not reachable or unattainable. I think that our presence serves as a means of giving them that extra impetus they need to go on and attain whatever goals they have. Times have changed to the point where a black man can enter areas that were heretofore some sort of, you might say, prohibited.
Do you feel that 3 is an adequate number at this point in time?
Well, certainly I don't feel 3 is adequate. I think as many as can get in, but 3 is a start. Let's do it.
The astronauts go on a tour of NASA installations, and they observe what goes on in NASA at the various installations, what are the specialties of this installation, and so they're learning NASA. They're learning about NASA, and this happens maybe within the first few weeks of their arrival. Then they go into a training program to acquire those basic skills necessary to do the job that they have to do as astronauts. They learn how to deal with parachutes. They learn how to land in the water with a parachute or land on land with parachutes. How to do the basic things they might need to do in terms of emergency escape from a space vehicle on a pad. They learn courses about spaceflight, things about orbital mechanics, and those types of things that they would have to know in order to be just an astronaut. Then after they finish that 1-year period, they go into specific training for specific systems that they want to become experts on or specific missions that they're about to fly.
I had an opportunity to fly in space twice. The first mission was STS-8, which occurred in September, October of 1983. That was the first night launch and night landing of the shuttle. It was the third mission of Challenger. The mission consisted of 5 people, including a commander, Dick Truly, pilot Dan Brandenstein, and 3 MSs, of which I was one. And so the day that we flew, we got up at 10 o'clock at night, and we had breakfast, and about midnight we went out to the pad. And I remember that because it was dark and it was lightning and lots of rain, and I knew that there was an awful lot of people out there to watch this thing.
And it was raining, and the launch status was in a hold because of the rain. But fortunately, the weather cleared, and they resumed the countdown. And at ignition, the flash from the solid rocket boosters and the shuttle main engines was just so incredibly bright, and it was around midnight. And now it's almost like daylight. And we heard that the flash from the ignition and liftoff of the mission had been seen as far north as North Carolina from the Florida launch. But it was a spectacular mission, and it was one of the high points in my life to have the opportunity to be present and to watch that launch.
The ride up was really a fabulous ride. It wasn't as accelerating as most people think. People sort of tend to think that you were thrown back in your seat when you lifted off. No, that wasn't the case. It was a smooth, gentle ride up. The thing that made it different was the fact that when we lit the solid rocket boosters and those things generated all that light on liftoff, it lit up the cockpit just as well. And we were sort of blinded in the cockpit to some extent by the light from the solid rocket boosters. The experience on orbit was fantastic. Zero-G is really a unique and nifty experience. I still remember unstrapping from my seat and suddenly discovering that I was floating on the top of the cockpit, and said, gee, how do I get around? And very quickly you learn to adapt and how to get around.
Challenger, Houston's with you at Hawaii. The president is on the line.
Guy, congratulations. You, I think, are paving the way for many others, and you're making it plain that we are in an era of brotherhood here in our land, and you will serve as a role model for so many others and be so inspirational that I can't help but express my gratitude to you.
President Reagan's call on August 31st, 1983, officially acknowledged the desegregation of space.
When we came in, we started our descent from orbit in the daylight. As we came in, you could see the hot air flowing over the vehicle and the flames from the outside, and they really lit up the outside. As a matter of fact, it almost looked as if you were looking into a blast furnace from about Mach 18 to about Mach 8 or 8 times the speed of sound.
There was a very special part of our flight in the crew that we're very proud of. I'd like to introduce to you Colonel Guy Bluford and his wife, Linda.
I think we, as NASA people, should all be very proud of the space shuttle because I think it's a very dynamic, capable vehicle that'll be doing lots of good work for the next 10 or 15 years. So I feel very honored to have flown on STS-8 and to have helped do some of that good work, and I hope to, continue doing some of that good work. So once again, I'd like to thank you for all coming out, and I much appreciate, you welcoming us home. Thank you very much.
Further strides were made on February 3rd, 1984, when Dr. Ronald McNair's maiden voyage made him the second black American to go into space.
Ronald was always the curious type. I think it was back in 1958 when Russia first launched that spaceship. I think it was Sputnik. He would go outside and look up to the sky, and he just couldn't understand how something that size could stay up in the sky. But the main reason that he continued to look up to the sky because he got the feeling that maybe something may go wrong and that thing might fall. And he wanted to make sure he could see it coming down so it wouldn't fall on him. So he became real interested in space then. And I think from then on, he must have had somewhere in the back of his mind that he was going to play some part in space.
With a doctorate in physics from MIT, McNair went to work for Hughes Research Laboratories and soon gained international regard as a leader in laser physics technology. As a mission specialist on the Challenger flight, McNair conducted microgravity experiments, tested the new Cinema 360 camera, operated the shuttle's 50-foot mechanical arm, and was responsible for the launch of a German communications satellite.
Well, the only thing that he said about Earth itself, that Earth looks like a beautiful oasis. And he wished that they could settle in peace that it was tended to be. He hoped that someday that they could all live together like that.
When he flew his first flight, STS-41B, back in 1983, he took his soprano saxophone and actually played some, the unfortunate thing is that all of the video that was recorded from that flight was subsequently erased as a part of a rush job to get to record some other evolutions during the flight. So there is no photographic record of it, but he actually played a number of songs while he was on orbit that time.
This is just one more step in the evolution of our overall capability as a space transportation system, and there's a lot of growth left, so we'll be seeing more and more as time goes on. Again, we had a great time on 41B. I wish words existed that could describe it. If not, I think I'll make up some. Thanks a lot.
Colonel Frederick Gregory became the first African-American to pilot the space shuttle, April 29, 1985. 4 years later, aboard STS-33, he became the first black commander of a shuttle mission.
When the main engines lighted and ran as they were supposed to, and the solids lit and lifted gracefully, I suppose gracefully is a word that you might say, off the pad and then rolled over upside down and then began to fly up the eastern coast of the United States, everything worked perfectly. I had seen lots of movies of space. I expected the skin to be ripped off my face and be deafened by the tremendous sounds and vibrations, but in fact it was a very almost gentlemanly, docile, friendly environment during this first 8 minutes of ascent.
As Colonel Gregory discovered, it's important to watch what one eats in space, where even a light snack requires the use of special zero-gravity utensils and trays designed by Dr. Shurney to keep one's food from floating away.
Worked with and designing concepts for eating in space that are like the use of the fork, knife, spoon, this type thing. And we found that, you know, everything that you would have here is not normal or either for space travel. Like you think of drinking water, but you just can't drink water from an open glass because it would bubble up and form globules and expand and get all over your face and flow out of the glass or whatever the drinking utensils that you may have. But we came up with the idea, a concept that it had to come from a bottle, a small tube wherein that you could suck like you drink milkshakes or whatever else you may have.
I thought about applying for the space program in 1977 when NASA initially offered the chance for people to apply for the space shuttle program, when they said, okay, we have this thing called the space shuttle that we're going to fly in a year or so. And I met all the prerequisites. The only thing was I was not a test pilot. I had not been to test pilot school, but I decided I'd try it anyway. And then by the time I got the paper and pencil in hand, I said, nah, you'll never be selected, so I didn't even apply. Fortunately for me, Guy Bluford, Fred Gregory, Ron McNair were among the 35 members of the class of '78, those people that were selected with that first group of space shuttle astronauts. So I told myself, if I'm ever given the opportunity again, I may not be selected, but at least I'll try.
Bolden became a test pilot. He applied to NASA in 1979 and was selected for the astronaut training program a year later.
Charles Bolden was probably one of the first astronauts I met. I was out in California doing part of my aerospace medicine residency training, and I was told that he would be speaking at one of the junior colleges in San Jose. So I went to the speech, and I passed a note to the person who was in charge saying that I was working in an aerospace medicine residency program and I'd like to meet him. And after the speech, he came over and talked to me and listened to my goals and aspirations and said, yeah, you look like you'd be a nice person to work for NASA. And I said, well, that's what my ultimate goal is. And then the following day, he was repeating the speech, and I went back. And I'm sitting in the audience, and I didn't even think he even noticed me. And he said, oh, and I'd like you to meet one of the other people who's going to be working for the space program, too. And he introduced me. Aerospace medicine looks at the health aspects of the air and the space environment. And the difference between that and regular medicine is that our patients are healthy and we're trying to keep them that way, making sure that they're healthy in their work environment while they're on Earth, and looking at workers in the workplace and how that may relate to the space environment.
There are a number of people out at Ames that we've worked with over the years, again in the medical field, who have done some research with what we call space adaptation syndrome, the kind of space motion sickness that somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50% of the people who fly in space suffer or experience.
Now, this may sound a little ghoulish to your audience, but the very first thing we do when we bring somebody into this laboratory is we make them sick using a variety of insidious devices developed by NASA over the years specifically for the purpose of making people sick. A rotating chair is possibly the one that's most widely known about. And we do that not just because we're sadistic, we do that because we've found that no two people develop a physiological symptom profile in exactly the same way. What we do is we document which response changes in John Doe, and we teach him how to not do that. As simplistic as that may appear on the surface, it's a relatively complicated training procedure because you have to teach somebody how to control as many as 20 responses simultaneously in only 6 hours. Now, we put this training program together specifically with one goal in mind, to help the crewmen in space.
Astronaut Charles Bolden piloted the Space Shuttle Columbia on his own first flight, January 12, 1986.
We have liftoff. Liftoff of Columbia on mission 61C, and the shuttle has cleared the tower. It's in controlling now. Columbia's ready as normal.
It was absolutely breathtaking. It was thrilling, but it was everything I expected plus some. I was ready for it technically. There was nothing that surprised me as far as vehicle performance or how you do this or how you do that. I had done a lot of extra study to make sure that I understood the different places that we were going to see, the sequence that they were going to come in, and I had kind of taken it as a personal undertaking to do as much photography of the continent of Africa as I could. I was just flabbergasted from the very beginning to find that it's just so massive, even from 300 miles out in space, that there's just no way in the world that you can comprehend it all in the short span of, say, 5 or 6 days. And we were up for 6 days, and I was just starting to learn and feel comfortable with stuff at the end of that 6 days.
Bolden's flight ended on January 18, 1986, just 10 days before the liftoff of STS-51L. It was perhaps the most highly promoted of any shuttle launch, the realization of an American ideal. A crew comprised of men and women, black, white, and Asian. Mission Specialist Ellison Onizuka. Pilot Mike Smith. Teacher in space Krista McAuliffe. Commander Dick Scobie. Payload Specialist Greg Jarvis. Mission Specialist Judy Resnick. And Mission Specialist Ron McNair.
I feel that he must have had some sort of a premonition. The day before that flight, he spoke with me on the telephone, and it looked like he just didn't want to put that telephone down. He spoke with me a long, long time. And he said, I hope they get this thing off the ground so I can get back here and finish raising my children. This is about the most important things that he said to me.
Flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
My other boys and I had gone down for the launch, and after several postponements, we decided that we would go back to Atlanta because we'd already seen one launch, and we would go back for the landing. So we were under the impression that they were going to cancel this thing out. I went to sleep after I got home, and when I woke up to the tapes. First, I thought it was one big, horrible dream. But if you recall, they continued to show those tapes over and over and over again, and I realized that dreams don't repeat like that. At the time, the only feeling I had was a feeling of grief that I had lost one of the most important people in my life.
For more than 2.5 years after the Challenger disaster, no shuttle missions were launched. But the launches have resumed. And a renewed determination to pursue space is the legacy left by the Challenger crew. The impact of that legacy has been felt at independent organizations like the U.S. Space Camp and Academy in Huntsville, Alabama, where enrollment has increased from 5,000 in 1986 to more than 20,000 in 1990.
You know, sometimes black people, minorities, and women think about things in terms of social programs, and that their role is in social programs, and certain types of technology, especially technology that's sort of on the outer limits or the cutting edge, is reserved for a certain group of people. For me, that's nonsense. It's nonsense because one of these days that technology is going to be very mainstream, and we won't be there unless we get involved very early.
A lot of times, you know, people say, well, let's get the astronauts to talk to our young folks. I think our old folks need to know about the space program too, and need to understand what the benefits of it are, and need to also understand that they can continue to improve themselves. Right now, the space program, the decisions that are being made as to whether we're going to continue in space technology and research are made by, quote unquote, the old folks, not the young folks. So unless we prepare our world to be a place that the children who are growing up today can readily step into, we're not going to be setting things up well for them. So even if they do really want to be involved in the space program, or want to be involved in science, or want to be involved in world issues, if we haven't laid the groundwork, then they're not going to be able to do that.
People always ask you, what are we going to discover? I don't know. I don't have any idea. If I knew, we wouldn't need to go. That's one of the exciting parts about spaceflight, is just the prospect of what's going to come out that you never even dreamed of before.
In a few minutes, back to Earth with the Victory Garden and a tour of Saville Gardens at Windsor Great Park and the landscape at a Grand Cypress Hotel in Florida. Then nature shows us once again the sky, the great birds of prey that flock and thrive in its native Europe, the raptors, the hunters of the sky tonight at 8, and Masterpiece Theater After the War, Love and Kisses, Hope for Achievement in the Art World tonight at 9. By the way, tomorrow evening here on KQED, also in connection with Black History Month, we continue with Eyes on the Prize, Ain't Gonna Shuffle No More, about Cassius Clay becoming Muhammad Ali. And We Shall Overcome, a documentary about Harry Belafonte, the song, Pete Seeger, and Joan Baez at 11:30 tomorrow night. Also, South Africa Now reports on what's being done to end apartheid in South Africa. That'll all be tomorrow evening. And Tuesday night, Roots of Resistance, a story of the Underground Railroad and of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. That'll be at 11 o'clock tomorrow evening here on Channel 9.
Major funding for this program was provided by grants from the McDonnell Douglas Foundation and the McDonnell Douglas Corporation, a company of leaders, and from the National Science Foundation. Additional funding was provided by the Carnegie Corporation of New York and the financial support of viewers like you.
This is PBS. This neighborhood in Washington, D.C. was once home to a proud and successful black community.
The Reagan Revolution slashed $51 billion in social spending.
Frontline correspondent Roger Wilkins examines the economic and political forces that created the urban underclass.
All the cotton has been picked, all the shoes has been shined. What do we do with excess labor in 1989 and 1990?
America's throwaway people.
The development of the black underclass, Tuesday evening at 10 o'clock here on Channel 9.
If you live in the Highlands of Scotland, what you don't want to be is a rabbit. In fact, you don't want to be a bunny anywhere in Britain. And forget about being a fish. You're really much better off as a human, watching eagles, hawks, and owls, the hunters of the sky. Next time on Nature.
The Hunters of the Sky take wing tonight in a half an hour here on Channel 9. Look, there's one over there, like an osprey. This is member-supported KQED, Channel 9, San Francisco.
Hello, I'm Bob Thompson, and welcome to the Victory Garden. Today we'll show you how indoor plants are cared for at one of the most luxurious resorts in the country. Peter Seabrook showcases several gardens in Windsor Great Park in England, and Marion will tempt you with her recipe for celeriac. That's coming right up, so stay tuned.
Funding for the Victory Garden is provided by this station and by other public television stations. And by W.R. Grace & Company, makers of Peter's professional plant food and potting soil and Peter's concentrated liquid plant food for all home gardening needs, both indoors and out. By America's largest producer of container-grown plants, Monrovia Nursery Company, supplying garden centers and local nurseries nationwide. And by Mantis Manufacturing Company, makers of a full line of lightweight lawn and garden equipment for the home gardener, including the Mantis Spraymate, the battery-powered garden sprayer.
We have a lot of gardening to show you today, so let's get right with it with this report from Peter Seabrook.
Well now, my American cousins, we've got a treat for you today. And you may need to take notice. This is one place you will never come. The general public can't get here. If you look on the skyline, you can see Windsor Castle. It's the seat of our royal family, and over the centuries, kings and queens have lived here. And why not? Look at the lovely avenue of chestnuts and plains, and those mown grass. Occasionally a herd of deer walk by. Private grounds for the kings and queens and princes. But there is one place, just a mile or so down the road, where we can go. Still part of Great Windsor Park and the Royal Estates. It's called Savile Garden. Open 365 days in the year, and it's a delight. If you're British and you set foot on Crown Estate lands, you sort of sense it immediately. If you look a little closer, then you'll see from the high standard of maintenance and the care of everything, and even more, there'll be little symbols. If you cast a glance up to the apex of the roof, you can see the royal cipher there. E2R, our present Queen, Elizabeth II, the housing for workers built during her reign. And we've come into Windsor Great Park. It stretches for thousands of acres. And it's just one of estates that the royal family own and administer right across Britain, from Sandringham in Norfolk up into Scotland. But here at Savile Gardens, rhododendrons are something of a speciality. And I said that everything was done well. You can see that the seat has certainly been made to last. Nobody's going to take that home as a souvenir. But if you are very keen and interested in gardening, well, right at the entrance, there's a little gift and bookshop so that you can find pamphlets on the gardens themselves and even buy a plant or two that you've admired. But before the crowds come, let's have a quick look. It's the beech trees in several small copses on the ridge that I think created the strongest impression for me, and it's the thing I think about every time people mention Savile Gardens. And underneath them, this white fork moss, Leucobrium glaucum. In the winter, it's rich green when it's wet, and then as it dries out in spring, it goes really white, bright white. But the land here is a rather acid sort of sand, and it was the late Eric Savile who came here quite recently, really, in the early 30s, and set about planting a garden. Obviously, he needed to drain it first of all, and one of the skills of Sir Eric was landscaping, these woodland glades, where he would just plant the edges with azaleas and rhododendrons and have a really very natural sort of look. You can see it through there, I think, back into the trees. And then a little lower down, this is where he was building the grand view, so to speak, and once people come in the entrance, they'll see at the edge of the pond the Lysochitum americanum, the skunk cabbage, and the azalea. And then, this is what I mean about views. Man made the pond. It was just all boggy here, and he dug out, this is what's called the top pond. And then the trees, been there for centuries, used as a backcloth for the azalea and rhododendron plantings. You hear the airplanes too quite commonly. We're just a 15-minute drive from Heathrow, while more people on their way to in and out of London don't pop in here. I really don't know. Especially in May. The azaleas, I was here just 7 days ago, and that bank was in tight bud, and with just a little warmth, a great sea of colours unfolding now. Doesn't matter which way you turn. Both the broad views are spectacular, and the planting is very good too. I mean, the azalea, very nice white flowered. The Japanese azalea in with the hostas. You notice too that right the way through the plantings, it's very deep with oak leaf mould. That's what they use to keep the weeds under control, and if a few weeds do come, well, it doesn't take a minute. They just come out very easily from that soft, mulchy conditions. Because the rainfall is not very high, only about 20 inches or so a year. It's just the moisture running through that a lot of these hostas and waterside plants enjoy. It's a cercis, tremendous collection of trees. This is a lovely, almost like a maidenhair fern, but a slightly larger style. Good autumn colour too. And you need to get used to seeing blankets and blankets of trilliums and hostas. They're grown on the grand scale. But when you talk about views, I think perhaps on the bridge here, this is the best of all. Deciduous azaleas, Japanese azaleas, you can smell them in the air. Iris at the water's edge, cut-leaved maples and copper beech. Really quite a magnificent sight. And there's plenty to see all the year round. The specialism is, as we've said earlier, azaleas and rhododendrons. And I think we're pretty well here for the day on a number of them. This is the Euchushiminum hybrid types. I mean, we recommend them usually for small and low growing. You know, they're not the biggest of things, but you get this very acid bag shot sand and then mix in plenty of leaf mold and you get some size. I mean, look at these hybrids here. No exaggeration to call these tree rhododendrons. Really beautiful bark, as well as the cascades of flower in May. And if you garden in the shade under trees, well, then you won't be short of planting ideas here. We've got the little Clintonia borealis. It's a pretty thing. And if you're going for even denser cover, right, tight against the oak trunk, beautifully green and mossy, we've got the Tiarella Kalina. That will flower for weeks and weeks and weeks and give you a constant carpet of green. Oh, yes, and lots of different varieties of trilliums, not only blankets of them. Here we've got Trillium Cecily, a leafless trillium. And our own wild violet, the dog-toothed violet. But here with the copper-leaved form covering the grass. And now a mass of those camphori rhododendrons. Beautiful soft colouring now. They'll be followed by rich green foliage, all in the blue poppies, the Mechanopsis. Lots of different kinds. Here we've got the hybrid, Cross Sheldoni, Crewston hybrid. That's a very dark colour. I might be able to show you another bigger one in a moment, but just take in first of all the extravagant way the hostas, first of all, and then the trilliums again are planted. They delight in the conditions here. Oh, yes, this was the Mecanopsis I wanted to show you. The very high temperature we had on Good Friday and all that moisture has pushed these out much earlier than usual. We would expect to see them in full flower from about the middle of June. And just look at the size of that patch. It will be a sea of that rich blue in just 2 or 3 weeks' time. Even more trilliums wherever you look. Oh, and the primulas. They weren't out when we were here last week. The Japanese primula, Primula japonica, coming up with candelabra-type shapes. They like the moisture too, old leafy soil. And the Caltha, the marsh marigolds, little ditch running through there. They'll always find a bit of extra water, and the copper leaves of Rodgersia. Countless different varieties of hosta. This one, Hosta crispula. You can see the flower heads just coming up. Some of them have quite nice fragrant flowers. The flowers come in whites and mauves. Oh, and speaking of scents, as you walk about here under the trees, you keep catching different scents. The azaleas are the strongest, but we've got here the Smilacina from North America. Lovely lemon scent. It doesn't matter which path you take or which ride you walk, there's a surprise round every corner. I mean, here, just 30 or 40 feet from the water, it's the dry garden. Gravel imported, just so they get even freer drainage and very hot on the sun. And then this side, it's a collection of old shrub roses underplanted with hemerocallis. And this Rosa, Exanthina, Spontanea, canary bird. What a name to give a lovely plant like that. It's one of the first of the roses to flower, and of course it needs space. And you may be interested to note that here the mulch or the surface covering is spent mushroom compost. There's even 1 or 2 old mushrooms still there. Once the farmers have taken several crops of mushrooms, then that old rotted down horse manure mixed with peat and a bit of chalk is marvellous stuff to put over the surface, but not for the rhododendron and azaleas. You've got to keep that here for the roses, because the roses don't like the soil, which tends to be a bit acid on this bagshot sand. Here's another beautiful walk. Yes. Oh, and there's some charming little plants here. The Erysemon, Jubilee Gold. Isn't that a marvellous combination of colour? The yellow and purple. Oh, and a pretty little Hypericum, Cerestioides. That just needs a little bit more sunshine. And the Sedum. And how beautifully placed that is with the purple-leaved barberry behind it. Berberis, just in flower. Oh, and here's a good planting idea. Those of you that are interested in clematis and haven't perhaps got trellis or some other sort of post work, why not let it go up and over one of the junipers? And you've got evergreen foliage and lovely purple flowers. This is Clematis alpina. Lots of plants here from South Africa and from the drier parts of the country. Euphorbia griffithii, bright red bracts. That'll keep its colour for a very long time. And another euphorbia, wolfeni with lime green colouring. Great plants, those, for flower arrangers. Oh, here, yes. Here's a plant from South Africa, the Euryops, Craius. That wants to be really baked. You need plenty of free draining conditions around the base of that to keep it growing strongly. Oh, and beautiful foliage too. It sometimes pays just to turn a leaf or a shoot on this Abies amabilis. It's got the lovely young growth coming too. But this is a garden really to stop and admire the views, as well as having a notebook to take the detail. And from here, straight on to the wall garden and the alpine series. The one thing this garden doesn't have is its grand house or building. That's what we're used to in these big estates. And Sir Eric Saville went to the East End of London at the end of the Second World War and got all of the old yellow stock bricks from the bombing and built this lovely south-facing wall for the climbers. And because he'd no rock garden, he constructed a whole series of these low tables. It was a clever idea, really, because it meant that he could change the soil and plant different groups in each of the beds. I mean, we've got here the little Viola gracilis from Southwest Asia. A number of perennial plantings, little low cedar there, and almost flowering to the day for us, Aethionema grandiflora. Great swath of pink. And you can be sure whatever week you come, there'll be something of interest to see in the rock beds down the Grand Walk here. And the edge has the most beautiful yew hedge, Taxus baccata. Clip this for 30 or 40 years and it gets so strong you could ride a car on it, you know. And if it's too big, you can chop it back and it grows again very easily. And it's the perfect edging or formal background to the rose garden. But before we see that, I must just show you what I think is one of the finest specimens of wisteria that I've seen. Self-supporting, just the odd wooden prop here and there to keep one or two of the bigger branches up. Wisteria sinensis. And give it a week or a fortnight, and there'll be waterfalls of blue flowers coming down. If you have a wisteria that's not flowering too well, remember, all the side shoots need to be pinched with your thumbnail as soon as they're 6 inches or so long. Now we're into the formal rose garden. I particularly like the way that they trim off the edges because it gives a very nice pattern then as you look up the garden to several beds. This bed's just been replanted in March. But of course they have resoiled, taken all the old soil out. That's what you need to do if you're replanting roses, and put fresh soil in and plenty of manure to make them grow. And the hedge down here was just ordinary Lawson hedge, but if you trim that for about 40 years, it gets a bit fed up with it. And there were a few brown patches, so it's all been stripped out and replaced now with a young yew planting. Who knows, 40 years' time, it'll be as good as the one I was leaning on just now. And with the climbing roses, we have a very nice post and rope system. When you tie the young growth of the roses along that, you have ropes of bloom through the summer. And then they edge it at this time of the year with that sea of forget-me-nots. Absolutely marvelous show of colour through the spring. And in about a fortnight's time, that'll all be stripped and then very well dug. And it's dahlias that take their place. But before we leave here, I'd just like to draw your attention to the oaks, because the whole of the Windsor Great Park is steeped in history. And if we go back to Queen Elizabeth I and the time of our Spanish Armada invasion, that's when they needed more oaks for the great ships. And 13 acres of acorns were planted here. I'll tell you, you can really walk history and see the royal family over the years in this part of the country.
What a beautiful garden, Peter. Well worth putting on the itinerary of anyone's next trip to England. Well, next, Jim Wilson has drawn a pretty good assignment. He's at the Hyatt Grand Cypress in Orlando, Florida, with this story.
Hey, you made it. You're not going to be disappointed. You wait right there, and I'll meet you in a minute on the other side of this waterfall. Isn't this something? Today we greet you from the grotto of the Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress Hotel near Orlando, Florida. And I'll let you in on a secret. This is all man-made. It's not carved out of bedrock. Wasn't even here 3 years ago. And this is all part of a 1,200-acre self-contained resort. Any recreation you'd like is here. Tennis, golfing, boating, swimming, even an Audubon nature preserve. And to take care of the needs of the guests in the 750 rooms requires 1,100 employees. But what brought us here today was horticulture. And they've done a marvelous job of landscaping outside. But wait till you see inside, specifically the atrium, where earlier today we met staff horticulturist Tom Underwood, who showed us around. Well, Tom, you have what amounts here in this atrium to a huge greenhouse with a roof up there, a glass roof 18 stories high, and you've got a veritable jungle of plants and even jungle birds that you can hear hollering in the background. And yet you have to consider the needs of your guests. So how in the world do you keep all of this in show condition? What's your secret?
I think our secret is paying attention to detail and looking at the little things, making sure that all the plants get regular maintenance and regular care, and that everything looks fresh and clean and lush.
Well, now specifically, tell me how you do it with this wide range of understory plants you've got here. You've got philodendron, and then you've got a group of bright bromeliads over there, and you've got some ferns, and some ficus, and these things have got to have different requirements. How do you go about meeting them?
Our maintenance program is intended to give each plant individual care. And one important part of that maintenance program is grooming. And all of our interior landscaping technicians carry certain tools with them. One of them is a sharp pair of scissors. And in this case, along the walkway here, the grooming would include pruning off any broken fronds that are there, any yellow foliage, replacing any plants that might get trampled. We're always trying to keep everything looking fresh and new.
Well, now those shiny leaves over there, they're slick as a whistle. How do you keep them that way?
Keeping the plants dusted and clean is an important part of maintenance. And we do two different things. One thing is that we actually come in and wash the leaves with a soap and water solution. The other thing is that we use a feather duster, and everyone carries a feather duster with them, and we always make sure that the plants are dusted and kept clean.
Each and every leaf?
Every one.
Well, I tell you, those look great, and so does this big plant here. What kind of palm is this one?
This is an Everglades palm.
Well, now, what's it growing in?
It's growing in an artificial soil mix that's actually contained in a planter.
Well, now, what's underneath that?
Well, there's more hotel underneath that. It's actually the hotel service area is underneath us right now. So these are actually inside a planter that has a bottom on it that has special drainage built into it.
Well, now, these big plants, so they've got to have a lot of value, like this sago palm here. How do you go about watering something like that?
All the plants in the atrium get hand-watered using a hose, and we always test each and every one before we water it. And the way we test to see if the plant needs to be watered is using a small soil probe. We come along and we scrape the bark away and probe down into the soil at the base of the plant, pull up a sample of the soil, and see if it's wet or dry, and that's how we tell if the plant needs to be watered.
That's a neat idea. Neat. But now, I see something here that I don't understand. What's going on with these little shoots that are coming out here?
What's happened on this sago palm is that it's actually been shaded out. These lower pups have been shaded out as the other specimens have grown around them. We're starting to see some decline in the areas here at the bottom.
So you're not getting enough light through?
Right.
Well, now, how about light in this atrium in the winter? Do you have enough of it?
We have a good deal of light, but it's not enough. And we supplement the natural light with grow lights that you can see up around the 4th floor here, a series of high-intensity grow lights.
Yeah. But even at that, they stretch a little bit in the winter, but do they square up a little in the summer and look better then?
Well, we do notice a difference from one season to the next, and we do adjust the amount of time that the lights are on to make up for the shady period. In the wintertime, we leave them on longer.
Well, I see one over here that is not lacking for anything, this orchid. What kind is this?
This is a Vanda orchid.
And it just looks like it's been popped in there. And what's it growing in?
Well, it's growing in a really loose soil mix. Orchids prefer their terrestrial plants, and they prefer a real loose soil mix. Doing real well in this type of an environment.
Watering, how often do you water that one?
For the most part, they like to stay on the dry side, about once a week, sometimes not that often.
Well, that's a lesson for our gardeners, you know, don't water too often. But speaking of water, you got a nice water course going through here, water all through the lobby of the hotel, and these plants are just as happy. Now, that one over there that's going down into the water, what is it?
That is a lipstick plant. It's a relative of the African violet, and our goal here is to encourage it to cascade over the rocks and help it look lush and tropical and hide the edge of the pond.
But in your plant care here, do you have to take any special consideration of all the water in here?
We sure do, Jim. And that's a real important consideration because we almost have a complete ecosystem here with the plants and the birds and the fish in the pond. So we really have to take extra special care that any pest control that we do is not going to adversely affect any of those parts of our environment here.
I'll tell you, all this special care is really showing in some of these plants, like that orchid growing over there. It's so natural looking and so happy, and these bromeliads. But surely along the way, you've got to have some problem areas.
We do, and I'll show you one.
Okay. I don't see any problem. Here you got a little jungle-like group of shrubs and a couple of wooden deer and a beautiful polyparrot there in the cage. Where's the problem?
Well, it's the bird that's the problem. And what we find in this area is that we have a lot of feathers that fall to the ground, bird food that gets scattered around on the ground, and also because of the interest in the birds, a lot of people walk in and the plants tend to get a lot of wear. So we spend a lot of time around these bird cages. We really feel it's worth it because our guests enjoy them.
But that's not a horticultural problem.
No, it isn't. Let me show you one over here. What we're looking at here looks like an optical illusion. It looks like there's 3 palms there, but there's really only 2 because of the mirror.
Well, what's the problem with them? They don't seem to be growing well at all.
No, we've been watching these palms over the last few years, and they haven't put out hardly any new growth. And we feel that the problem is due to lack of light. And the symptoms would be lack of growth over a period of time, and also the stretching out that you see in the fronds there, where they've stretched out as though they're reaching for the light.
But doesn't that big mirror behind reflect some light and help them a little?
Well, it helps a little bit, but it really poses some special problems on the other hand. The mirror, just like the plant, needs to be sparkling clean all the time, and we have a whole crew of people who do nothing but clean windows and mirrors, and they need to have room to get back there, so we have to keep that in mind as we design the plantings here.
Now, you've got not 2, but 3 palm trees in here, and this third one over here looks a lot better. What's the answer to that?
This palm is a little bit closer to the windows, and we feel like this one's getting a little bit more natural light here, and I really think that's making the difference in its case.
Tom, the special care that you've given all these plants, in close-up attention that you give them, you must have one piece of advice that you'd like to leave with our Victory Garden viewers on how they can grow houseplants indoors. What would that be?
It would be to go easy on the watering.
I'll buy that.
What an assignment. I know, Jim. Somebody had to do it. Next up is Marion with her recipe for today.
Celeriac. Hard to pronounce, harder to spell. Takes forever to grow, and it's ugly. But boy, does it taste good, served cold in that classic recipe, celeriac remoulade. First, I remove the skin. Now, under the influence of my favorite grater, I'm going to turn these wedges into a julienne of celeriac. Now, here's some good Dijon mustard and olive oil, mayonnaise, sour cream, a little bit of red wine vinegar, and some fresh tarragon. And that's the marinade. It will take 6 hours in the refrigerator to marinate the celeriac. There. Next time for company, try this.
Next time, Roger Swain prunes an apple tree, and Jim Wilson takes us to beautiful cypress gardens in Florida. You don't want to miss that. That's next time on the Victory Garden.
Funding for the Victory Garden is provided by this station and by other public television stations. And by W.R. Grace & Company, makers of Peter's professional plant food and potting soil and Peter's concentrated liquid plant food for all home gardening needs, both indoors and out. By America's largest producer of container-grown plants, Monrovia Nursery Company, supplying garden centers and local nurseries nationwide. And by Mantis Manufacturing Company, makers of a full line of lightweight lawn and garden equipment for the home gardener, including the Mantis Spraymate, the battery-powered garden sprayer.
We'll learn more about the food chain, the world of birds, those with talons and beaks that go after other creatures, predators of the sky, hunters of the sky of Europe, next. And that's followed by tonight's presentation of After the War on Masterpiece Theater at 9, and the saga of World War I from 10 o'clock until about 11:45 this evening, and then a chapter of mystery. Wednesday night, who was it that built Stonehenge? Put all those stones out there on the Salisbury Plain.
Here's some good news for those of you who have enjoyed Chef Marion's cooking segments here in the Victory Garden. Available on home video is Victory Garden Recipes, Marion's 90-minute tape featuring 50 of her favorite recipes. From parsnip tarts to broccoli crepes, from corn pudding to gazpacho. Priced at $29.95 plus handling, this video cassette can be ordered by calling 1-800-441-3000. Credit cards accepted. Also available in bookstores.
America's favorite Chinese chef, Martin Yan, is now seen Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7:30 here on Channel 9.
Total concentration. Wow, unbelievable. Look at this. Listen. Wow, music to your ear. It is very heavy. Tough to make a living. Are you mad? And he said, no, I'm just shaking off some calories.
Watch KQED's own Martin Yan cook up a storm on Yan Can Cook. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7:30 here on member-supported Channel 9. KQED San Francisco.
Will you win this luxurious 1990 Volvo sedan with your entry? The new 1990 KQED Classic Sweepstakes poses a classic dilemma. Which of these grand prizes will you choose? A dream vacation to Taiwan, Singapore, and Thailand via China Airlines of Taiwan. An exquisite hand-knotted Persian rug from Stanford Rug Gallery. A week of pure luxury in scenic Maui via Continental and Aloha Airlines. Win these or any of hundreds of fabulous prizes in the KQED Classic Sweepstakes. Trips to exotic places, dining at 4-star restaurants, getaways to great hotels and charming bed and breakfast inns, shopping sprees, furnishings, jewelry, and more. It's an exciting way to support quality television, and it's easy to play. Use the stickers to select the grand prizes you'd like to win. Include a donation with your entry, and KQED wins too. Enter by February 16th and be eligible to win a $2,000 shopping spree at Macy's. If you haven't received your entry packet, call 415-553-2150. Don't wait. Enter today. Local presentation of Nature on KQED is made possible in part by a grant from SMACNA contractors of the Greater Oakland, Santa Clara District, and San Mateo County chapters. Professionals in sheet metal, heating, and air conditioning, SMACNA sets the standards for construction professionals nationwide. Additional funding is provided by the members of KQED.
Nature is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you, your gas company, and America's natural gas industry, developing new ways to use clean gas energy to generate electricity and fuel vehicles to help meet America's goal for cleaner air. And by Siemens Engineering Solutions in electronic components and medical systems, telecommunications, energy, and automation. Siemens.
Open country, dotted with trees, ideal territory for aerial predators. The lives of the great birds of prey have always been a favorite subject of award-winning filmmaker Hugh Miles. Beginning in the rugged highlands of his native Scotland, he explores their world, their hunting and nesting habits, their migrations across continents, their tenuous place at the top of the food chain. As hunters, they've often been seen to be in competition with man and have suffered the same fate as other predators. But slowly, their story is beginning to change. Rescue efforts are underway to ensure that the mighty golden eagle and the speedy peregrine falcon ascend again into the open skies. A wilderness of wind and rock. This is not the typical image of Britain, but some of Europe's last wild places can still be found here, untamed and pristine, the hunting grounds for some of the world's most magnificent birds of prey. The Highlands of Scotland, where one bird stands supreme. Sharp claws, hooked beak, keen eyes, the golden eagle. It's equipped to kill to survive, and this has brought eagles into conflict with man. For centuries, birds of prey, or raptors, have been both admired and persecuted as competitors. But with a better understanding of these great hunters, they're becoming appreciated for what they are. Impressive at rest. Spectacular in flight. Though this powerful eagle makes the raptor's lifestyle look easy, they face a constant struggle to survive. More often than not, the prey gets away. In the harsh world of the high tops, mountain hares are few, so eagles in search of food must become hunters of the sky. Gliding effortlessly on a 7-foot wingspan, the golden eagle sails among the mountain updrafts on its endless quest for prey. Soaring between the clouds above and the earth below, its sharp vision detects the slightest movement. This aerial frontier provides a panoramic view for spotting the next meal. And when it does, the mighty talons are lowered into position, the eagle's weapons of death. Birds of prey have a vital role to play. They're essential for population control. Predator and prey have evolved together, creating a natural balance. With the feast over, this eagle returns to his lofty domain. As winter retreats, the highlands shake off their mantle of snow and ice. Migrant birds of prey are returning from Africa. Among them, one which disappeared from Scotland in the 19th century due to excessive hunting. Now, after nearly 50 years, the osprey has returned. After the long journey, the osprey needs to regain its strength, and pike are easy prey. Pike are predators of smaller fish, but while searching the shallows, they're vulnerable to attack from above, and predator becomes prey. The osprey is a daredevil fisherman. It's spring in the highlands. The nest now becomes the focus of activity. Like many raptors, the osprey is faithful to its nest site, returning there year after year. The male jealously guards the female. He mates with her as frequently as possible, as many as 200 times in the weeks before egg laying. Mating is often disrupted by intruding males, but they are vigorously resisted. The male invests 5 months in breeding, so he will aggressively drive out all other males from his territory. The pair works together to defend the nest site, using special calls and flight maneuvers. This pair has put up a good defense. Experiences like these are very important for breeding success. Strong bonds are formed in the process, and this pair may be together for many seasons, perhaps even for life. Hunger may make the female unreceptive, and this encourages the male to go out hunting. But he's hesitant to leave his mate, since other males may try to steal his nest and even his female. Eventually, he decides to take his chances. He may commute up to 6 miles to find a well-stocked pond. Relying on the art of surprise, he hovers.
Say your fly's open. へのギフト、西本貿易から。お申し込みはご覧の西本